This week, are old games killing new game sales? What is going on in the Asia and MENA games markets? Plus, we chat to the legendary game makers behind GoldenEye, Perfect Dark and TimeSplitters about their new roguelike Scrabble game. Hello, and welcome to the Game Business Show. To help me navigate these topics, plus a few more, I am joined by a long-time friend of the show. He's popped up here and there over the last 9 months, but this is his first full extended appearance. He's the editor, founder, and owner of Video Games Chronicle, Andy Robinson.
Hello.
You all right, Andy? Welcome to the show.
I'd say I'm more here to guide you, like for you to guide me through the topic. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, you're here to help me.
I'm the soundboard. I'll drop the one-liners.
You took the bold step yesterday of angering Nintendo fans by giving Metroid, the new Metroid game, 3 stars.
By daring to critique their game, yes.
How did that go? Was it a good reaction? Positive?
It's a space I'm sadly used to occupying in this day and age. What happens is you'll have reviews that your outlet has published over the last several years, plucked out, written by other critics to prove you wrong, your wrong opinion. And then they'll play the game and it'll go really quiet.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying that.
Is it the Concord review people bring up?
We gave Silksong 3 out of 5.
Oh, it's Silksong this week, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a freelancer. But this is a whole episode in itself, right? Is that you're criticised of bagging the publisher money if you give a bad game a good score. But if you give a good game, a like much anticipated game, a critical review, then you get even more abuse. And I think I've seen other press say this on both sides of the pond, that I think I've been doing it long enough to say it with authority as well, is that you worry more when you're giving a big game a bad score than the other way around, right? The easiest thing in the world, if we're talking about pressure, outside pressure and not being impartial, would be me to give Metroid Prime 4 a good, comfortable score, then go and retire to my smoking suite and, but light my cigar with the £50 notes. So no, when we're doing our jobs and actually being critical and honest, unfortunately, it also comes with a lot of kind of backlash. But yeah, I'm used to it, mate. Famous Nintendo hater.
I know.
They call me.
I get that a lot. Mostly Xbox. People think I hate Xbox, which is absolutely mad if you knew anything about me. But anyway, we've got quite a few big topics to get through. But actually, because we missed a show last week, it was Thanksgiving, there's a few news stories that are sort of knocking about. There's a couple of ones I want to talk about, but because the stories are still developing like that. Have you seen the horses story?
Yeah, it's been tough to follow. I don't think we've actually covered it. Yeah, they've just been, in the last, 12 hours, been banned on the Epic Game Store as well.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings into question all kinds of monopoly issues and censorship, etc. However, I don't actually know the exact content that is the issue, so I'd be hesitant to.
Well, that's the thing, and they're not really sharing it, Valve, and that's the thing. It's like, what is the bit that they can tweak? If it was in age ratings, if you get an age rating and your game goes, the ratings board will say it's because of this component. You've got this age rating, and they can cut out that swear word or they'll trim that sort of thing. And that's what they used to do with like Manhunt and everything. If you could do this, and your game will get unbanned in the UK. But obviously with these sort of private businesses, it's a lot harder. But it's a developing story, right? The GOG of backing it, and in a way, it's got more attention than I think it ever would have done.
Oh, is this good business? Yeah, right.
So we'll see how it plans out. But it's because the story's developing. I'm not going to talk about horses, but I want to, and we probably will talk about it in a future episode. But one of the stories I did want to talk about, and I talked about it in my micro on Monday. It's about Splash Damage. So if you've missed this story, Splash Damage has put all of its staff at risk of redundancy. They're a UK studio. They're famous for working on a bunch of games, but probably best known for supporting Gears of War. They made Gears of War Tactics. They'd only bought themselves out from Tencent back in September. Earlier this year, I'm losing my voice. Earlier this year, it cancelled the Transformers game it was working on. It's also been developing the long development project Astrid. What I understand is this is the result of a deal not materializing at the 11th hour, basically. They had this, there was a big contract they were going to sign, and then it didn't get signed, involving a big third-party publisher. So That's what's triggered this moment. One of my problems, Andy, is that there's a lot of these stories going around in games.
Yeah, and there are.
Splash Damage used to release a game almost every year.
Yeah, they were a real historic UK success story, Splash Damage.
But ever since they got that Tencent money, they've not really made anything. And this was like 2020. And I have to question the management a little bit here, because I know it's really difficult, right? You when you're independent, you have to put games out all the time, and you're answerable to a publisher partnership you've got. There is that pressure. You've got to get the game out. You've got to do this. There is an element of it. Suddenly you're given a war chest of money. I'm not saying this is what happened at Splash Damage, but I do worry this is the impression we're giving to outside investors. We're given a bunch of money and we don't seem to know what to do with it. We have these long in gestation projects that get cancelled over time. You and I know of another studio that's received a load of Tencent money that hasn't released any games since they received it. I'm not saying it's just Tencent money. It's other money that's out there.
It's certainly a challenge, isn't it? I interviewed a Sucker Punch recently, and he was talking about how a lot of those studios that PlayStation acquired, I mean, let's say, for example, Insomniac are, very prolific studio developer of games, that they treat it like it's their own money still, from when they were independent. And that's kind of the challenge, isn't it? That when you transition from having to, you've got to put a game out, right? The shipping a game, a lot of shipping a game is just knowing when you have to stop, right? No one, I think very few projects go until they're 100% satisfied with what they're producing. The old, kind of phrase is that they're abandoned, right? No game is finished, it's abandoned. But when you've got all of the money of Tencent, suddenly you don't have to abandon your project so soon, right? But it's a skill. That's why you're seeing Rod Ferguson, kind of parachuted in everywhere that needs to ship a game. It's a real skill. Yeah. And I learned that when I went dev side, how much of a skill that is, having a producer who knows when to look, stop doing that, that doesn't matter, this matters, let's get it out. And the risk of that is that, you're seeing, how difficult it is for companies like Xbox to make new studios or bring some of the new studios in, and suddenly they're not as prolific as they used to be, or they can't get the game out.
But there is a balance, right? So I always think about Obsidian as an interesting example, because they've actually just carried on releasing games almost as quickly and as frequently as they did before. But a part of me thinks Obsidian should take a bit longer. They've got more money. You can take a bit longer. You can be a bit more ambitious. You can try things you've not done before. You don't have to worry too much about, we have to get this game out within this window, or we're going. You don't have to be that worried about it. But you're right. It's a balance between, we've now got a bit more time and a bit more space to explore. Find the fun is the word they use. But then you get the opposite. But then the problem is they can't. You're right. It comes to a point where we do have to ship something. So it's about that discipline. And I think it's really difficult. And I think I do worry a little bit about leadership in the video game industry. I do worry that we're not skilled at dealing with that. And I think there's too many stories of big studios. It's terrible. The studio's been closed, or the company X has pulled out of support. NetEase has pulled out of this or whatever. But part of me wonders, they've spent a lot of money. Have they got anything to show for it? And that's, anyway, not saying that's what happened to Splash Damage. I'm sort of reading between the lines. And
I have absolutely no experience of it, so I might be talking complete waffle. But I wonder how much of it is the wave of studio heads of big studios now who've been successful coming through the indie ecosystem. I look at my own career, and when you make decisions, sometimes it's based on mistakes that you've seen or you've made in the past. So, I've worked at a big company, and I can use that experience to influence how I, kind of now direct my own, based on, what I've seen there. So I wonder how much of an impact that has, right? That maybe, some of them in the past would have taken the big AAA experience working in the factory, and applied those learnings, good or bad, to their own companies.
Well, hopefully things will work out for Splash Damage, but it's certainly been that was one of the biggest stories that's broken, particularly for the UK scene, and it's always a bad look. And also, people's jobs at risk. Obviously, that's the big one. We'll move on quickly to another news story. This is a little bit old, but I just thought it was an interesting one. Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney has criticised Steam once again, and this time around how it labels games that are made with AI. The Fortnite boss says that AI will be part of how all games will be made, and the tag will only lead to game reviews. Gamers review bombing titles. The AI tag is relevant to art exhibits for authorship disclosure, he says, and to digital content licensing marketplaces where buyers need to understand the right situation. It makes no sense for game stores where AI will be involved in nearly all future productions. Here's the thing with this. Tim often takes the business point of view. Like Epic's a B2B organization. I know it makes the biggest game in the world, right? But they're core. They're a B2B company. And when Tim Sweeney's talking, he's always thinking about how this impacts developers.
And they're not just a B2B company. They're a technology company. Tim Sweeney is a programmer.
Yeah.
Video games are not just technology. The reason that it's such an interesting medium, and I've always loved working around the games industry, is that it's a convergence of art and technology, right? So it's very fine from a technology standpoint to say this is not useful to have this AI label on here. But yes, from an art standpoint, when I go to the Tate, I'd quite like to know whether AI was involved in making this painting. And a lot of people, agree with that. I think somebody in the comments said, you wouldn't, you take, there's no issue. People don't have an issue with a label on your yogurt saying whether it's, organically sourced, the ingredients, right? It's just useful information for people who want to use that.
Yeah. I guess I can't, on one hand, I sort of agree. The small bit that I agree with him on is that I do think an AI label is going to become irrelevant. I think that's like you're just sticking it on everything, right? But descriptors, maybe not. Like, this is what the AI is in this game. I think that might be a little bit more relevant, but a label that just says AI. And to be fair, Steam's labels don't just say that. They do go into details. But at the same time, we are still at this early stage in the AI journey. We don't know how this is going to net out. We've got folk who will tell you that AI is going to lead to a deluge of slop and take all our jobs, and it's going to be awful. And we've got folks who believe AI will transform the industry. We had Owen Mahoney on this week, who thinks that AI is going to triple the size of the video game industry and make everything bigger and more successful. And I think as we muddle through and start to learn what we think is and isn't right, and what, which is what we're doing at the moment, there's a lot of hyperbole around. I do think actually labels like this are just probably going to be quite useful for people.
Yeah, I mean, they're perhaps they're irrelevant in, for massive, mega games like Fortnite, where it's going to become a given that they're, half made with AI slop. But certainly games that are AI free will have their place, right? In the same way that at the moment you're seeing a big drive for physical releases. You're seeing a lot of backlash around game key cards because there is an audience that, does not want to, have that, to be spending their money on that.
But I think we also don't really know, like, what is, one of the things I often talk about is what is actually, like, I don't use AI in production of, in anything that I write, but we do use AI to get the audio level right on these shows. I use AI transcripts that come out from this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I use AI for transcription. It's about, to answer your question again, it's about the data set, right? The issue is not that you're using a tool to make something. I mean, no one's got an issue with Speed Tree, right? In Speed Tree, an artist has made bits of trees and then they cobble them together. The issue is, I mean, it's ironic that this has come out so quickly, but, and again, it's only an allegation at this point. We put a story on VGC yesterday that people think that there's AI art in the new chapter of Fortnite. Like the telltale is always if they've got multiple, like too many fingers, right? So it's not, that's just what fans think, and they're trawling on Reddit and trying to pull together evidence, right? And the issue with that is that it would have trawled through people's art to make that, right? It's plagiarism. We see, I mean, it's early days, but somebody put up a review yesterday, a Metroid Prime 4 review, that was clearly cobbled together by AI, like bits and pieces taken from elsewhere and hallucinating. He was mentioning like items and stuff that aren't in the game. That's the issue. I mean, no one's bothered about the tool. It's about the data set.
So the reason, and to be fair, I don't know any answers to this. That's obviously shit, right? But then you get something like what Arc Raiders did. I'm not talking about the voice AI. It's in our latest episode. Owen Mahoney talks about it. They scanned an actual landscape. They used satellite imagery to create a world, to create the landscape. And then the artist went in and, did the art thing on top of that landscape. Now that level wasn't built by artists. That was taken from the real world thing, but then artists modified it and changed it and edited. Now that wasn't even AI, right? They've not taken other levels and stuck them together.
It was satellite lasers, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm like, well, and I'm saying what's the difference because I don't actually know. There probably is quite an obvious difference here between taking somebody's level they've created and doing it. But then you've got roguelikes, self-create. You know what? I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm shut. The more I go down this, the more I get confused.
I mean, lots of people are doing interesting stuff, right? You know, if they're using their own data sets and, you know, they're doing things that genuinely pushes the medium forward in a way that can't be done, right?
That's the thing, yeah.
We went to Ubisoft recently.
Your teammates, yeah.
To see their demo, their AI kind of voice where you could ask the teammates like, hey, where should I find the next item? Are there any weapons nearby? Like you could ask game specific stuff. If you ask them, you know, what's going on in the election in Venezuela right now, they'll say, we don't want to talk about that. They're not chatbots. They're very designed to stick with the game. But that's an interesting use, right?
Yeah.
They've worked with, presumably, worked with, I think Arc Riders might have done this as well. You work with voice artists, you know, with their permission. You go, look, we're going to spit out loads of different lines. That is a use of AI that you could see being incredibly compelling, right? Going forward, that you can have NPCs that, you know, can go beyond the abilities of the developer and the lines that they can create, right? So I think you saw NVIDIA, you know, kind of create demos for that in years past. So absolutely, it's just at the moment, it doesn't look like it's quite there, does it?
Yeah, no, but that kind of thing.
There's very little in my life that generative AI or chatbots really impresses me. But I'm a creative. I'd like to think I'm a creative person. You know, I work in an industry that will be affected. So perhaps I would say that, but it doesn't really impress me right now.
I go on Google when I'm looking for a piece of information, which I have to do all the time, right? Because I'm writing an article. Oh, hang on, when did the release date of this game come out? How many copies of this game has actually been sold? And I put it into Google and they give me an answer on their bloody Google thing. And I know there's a very good chance that's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. 18 months ago, Google stopped being a search engine and it became an answer engine. And if you look at the press engine data, they think on average, the big game publication, so any publication with over 1 million readers, basically. So that could also go to lots. There's a big difference between an IGN and a smaller site. They reckon on average, they've lost half their audience. You know, mostly because of that. And it's also rubbish. I think we all know the answer. Yeah, I was going to say, I think we all know the answer when I say, has your experience got better? I mean, Google's borderline unusable now, isn't it? You can't trust it at all. And that's something that if I'm going to get my crystal ball out, I think we might see a pushback. I really do.
This is it. I do.
The digital world in general, right? Is that, I mean, we're the first generation, I guess, right? I mean, Facebook came out when I was 18, 19. You know, being the iPhone came out when I was 20, 21, first iPhone. Having the internet in your pocket. I'm already feeling it. I'm sure everyone, it'd be so nice to like just have a 3310 again and be disconnected. And you see the vinyl sales and the pushback to, you know, game key cards. And I honestly think there could be a pushback, which it comes back round to what you're saying about Tim Sweeney. I think that really, that isn't necessarily a given that he's right, that people won't care.
It's interesting, actually, because this is something that Owen said. You know, he thinks that we're worried about a load of AI slop, but he thinks people won't put up with it.
Yeah, and I spoke to somebody at Microsoft a couple of years ago at the Game Awards, and they were talking. This was pre ChatGPT 3 or 4, whatever the breakout one was, and he was saying to me like, "Oh, you know, it's massive. Like, what's coming, basically." You know, because they see that behind the scenes, obviously. But also it was noted in our conversation that, well, you know, AI has been able to make passable music for quite a while, but people don't buy music because it's objectively good. They buy music because they've bought into the artist and the idea behind that, right? You're not going to go and see ChatGPT at Wembley. I think there's other elements at play in entertainment on what. Well,
that's the thing. ChatGPT, nobody makes money out of actual music anyway. So it's like we've got something that makes it for us. Well, who cares? Like, it's no business reason for that. And you're right, the money's in the live stuff. Anyway, AI is a massive topic, and I'm aware of we've not even got through the news yet. I'll do one more story.
Oh, that was the news.
We have one more story. Nintendo buys a Singapore studio. It's again a little old now, but Nintendo has announced plans to buy Bandai Namco's Singapore studio. The Mario firm says it will acquire 80% of the developers' shares at the end of their financial year, basically, while the start of their next financial year, April 1st, 2026, with the remaining shares to be acquired at a later point. The new division will be called Nintendo Studio Singapore. It's rare for Nintendo to buy the studio.
How did they come up with that name?
Oh, I know. Just, they workshopped it for weeks. Well, I mean, they don't like to buy staff. You're going to have to do a lot more of the talking, Andy. I'm definitely losing this.
So they basically, Nintendo this is a studio they've worked with for a while. I believe they worked on Splatoon series, and I think they were also, I'm told, the original developer for Metroid Prime 4, funnily enough, before they switched it over to Retro.
Oh.
So this is a studio they've been working with for a while. Although historically we don't see Nintendo acquire a lot of studios, they need people now, right?
Yeah.
They need they've been much of the last 15 years transitioning to the world of HD development, of needing more content. In a way, they've kind of been protected a lot of the last decade because they were able to move so many of those Wii U games that performed badly over to Switch and then see their sales, in some cases 10x. But they're obviously not going to be able to do that for much longer. Well, they're going to try their best for Switch 2 editions, see if they can re-release us the Switch games. But they need studios, they need development.
Yeah.
They're like doubling their footfall in Kyoto.
Possibly even more.
Putting a new building, yeah.
I looked this up. There was originally going to be a 13 stories building. And the reason why it's been delayed, that building, is because they want to add even more stories. They haven't actually specified how many. So it's going to be, they're hiring up a new load of studios. And you're right.
And it's interesting for them because Japanese companies, especially Nintendo, conservative Japanese companies, don't like to go and get staff. Like they like to, this makes sense because they've worked with them for a number of years. And they know they're a good fit. Okay, you understand our culture. Then Nintendo are not going to go out and hire 10,000 staff. They're going to go slowly.
Oh yeah, and this is interesting. So years ago, we're both fans of the developer Rare, and I was very confused as to why they didn't buy Rare. And I've obviously looked into it loads. And the reality is, Nintendo don't like buying studios because really you're buying people, because that's what you buy. Yes, there's IP and tech and stuff, but really you're buying people, and people can leave. And typically when a new studio is bought out, the management, the people that perhaps, in the case of Rare, the stampers who would be going like, they're the ones that pushed through and built that studio for good or for bad. They're going to leave at some point. They've just received millions of pounds, right? They're going to walk away at some point. And Nintendo's like, well, why would we invest in that? So many of Nintendo's, what we consider first party studios, like Intelligent Systems, are actually owned by Nintendo at all. They don't. They like to leave it unless they're in a situation where they need more staff, which is what
there's a chap who so the original Super Mario Brothers was made by a core team of 4 people, right? And one of them doesn't work for Nintendo. He has his own company, like Mark Cerny-esque, and was doing programming on a lot of the Famicom, kind of releases, and he's still working with Nintendo. That's a very, very, I don't want to say Japanese, it's very Kyoto culture there. That's what I imagine probably the sticking point might have been with Rare, is that maybe the conversation is, hey, Stampers, if we buy you, are you going to stay there for the next 20 years? And they're obviously going to say no. And you go, well, why would we do that then? Because Mr. Miyamoto has been there as long as he possibly could, right? They're all at retirement age and still going.
Yeah. Well, let's move into our big topics. And if my voice
before your voice absolutely implodes,
I
take over the show.
You're probably going to have to. This one is about old video games and whether or not it's a problem. Now, comes from this topic was inspired by Sega's recent financials. They revealed that new releases accounted for 17% of its game sales during its last financial quarter. They were challenged on it, and they gave a load of different reasons as to why they think that might be the case. They think competition's strong, pricing's too high for new releases. Players holding off for definitive editions was an interesting one. But Sega isn't alone, actually. Most major companies are seeing back catalog and legacy live service games drive their revenues, while newer titles aren't always delivering the numbers. One of the big ones, and I know that, Andy, you can talk to this, is Capcom. Their latest financials celebrated the success of Resident Evil Village, which came out 4 years ago, and Resident Evil 4 Remake, which came out over 2 years ago. Monster Hunter Wilds, their actual big release of the year, has dropped off quite a bit. I think is it behind Monster Hunter Rise now in terms of it's like the previous game selling better?
Only for the quarter. I think it sold less in the quarter, but there's all obviously there's lots of different caveats and context there. I think a lot of those games are like heavily discounted as well, right?
Yeah, well that's part of the problem. It's not, they're heavily discounted, and it's as good, if not better in some ways, than the latest thing that's come out. There's a Newzoo data. Now, this Newzoo data isn't entirely, I'll explain why it's not, doesn't tell us too much. It is stuff that you've just heard before. In 2024, 57% of all games played across PC, PlayStation, Xbox were 6 years or older. So that's Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox, those sort of things. And there are games in that list that are over 10 years old. Meanwhile, 32% of playtime was spent on games from the last 5 years. Only 12% of playtime was spent on new games, and that includes annualized sports franchises and titles like Call of Duty. Now, that doesn't surprise me too much. We've reported on that stuff before. And also, it's worth noting, the games like Fortnite and GTA Online are massive. They soak up hundreds and hundreds of hours. Of course, they're gonna skew the numbers. I'd also argue those games, although they're old games technically in terms of when they're released, I'd actually argue they're current games. And so there's that one. But I got Sakana sent me some data. So Matt Piscatella, thank you, Matt, for sending this over. Sakana do these weekly player engagement trackers, right? So every week they say, this is what players are engaging with and playing. And last week, 1,456 games on PlayStation in the US had at least one player on their panel. So they have a panel of people, and 1,456 games showed up on that panel. Of those nearly 1,500 games, only five of them reached 10% or more of the PS5 player base. Only 48% reached more than 1%. So out of those 48 games that reached 1% of PlayStation's player base, only 12 of them were released in 2025. If you remove sports games, that drops to just 8. So Call of Duty, Battlefield, Where Winds Meet, Ark Raiders, Skate, Ghost of Yotei, Borderlands 4, Dispatch, last week were the only games released in 2025, if we exclude the sports games, that PlayStation players played last week. Now, there'll be other games, but that's just on Sakana's panel. That's a week before, it's a week during a Christmas week. Newer games tend to do well. Just 8 non-sports games reached 1% of PlayStation players. Now, that for me is a little bit more insightful because that actually tells you what people are, it's not based on hours played. Does that, I don't know if that surprises you, Andy. But
it doesn't surprise me at all. Matt actually left our Patreon last week, so maybe it was something we said. Like, come back, Matt, no. Come back. It doesnnt surprise me at all. This has been the direction of travel for a long time, right? Didn't the Newzoo report estimate that over 90% of playtime on PC in particular is old games, right?
PC's even more, yeah.
And that to me is perhaps quite telling that there's just players have never had more content, right? In many cases available to them for very cheap, or perhaps included in something they already pay for, like a subscription, right? Especially on PC, Steam sales, even anecdotally, I always try and, because you can become a little bit out of touch doing what we do, right? You hang out with other journalists who get their games for free and play for work. And, so I always, stay in touch with friends who I have legitimate players. And they're all sat on massive backlogs, massive backlogs. I've got a friend who's the biggest Final Fantasy fan, right? Like, he would cry on the spot, about Final Fantasy. That's how much he loves Final Fantasy. He didn't play Rebirth for a full year after it came out because he's like, I've got too many games here, right? Sorry, go on.
That's me, because I don't have to play games for a living. I don't have to review them. I've got so many games on my backlog, but they're not just games I've fun to play. They're bona fide classics. Like, I've got Cyberpunk 2077 on my backlog, right? It's 5 years old, that game, but it's still cutting edge. So when another game comes along that goes, here's the Outer Worlds 2, I'm like, I hear it's good, but I haven't played this genuine bona fide mega game
yeah.
yet. So I'm sorry, now's not the right time. And it's like, and I look at the weekly GSD charts. We've been running them since September, and these games have all appeared in the top 10 in the last 6 weeks. Top 10 best-selling games in Europe, right? So Hogwarts Legacy, GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption are in there. I don't think people are surprised by that, but It Takes Two, Titanfall 2, Spider-Man 2, Far Cry Primal, Dame Eternal, South Park: The Fractured Butthole.
Is this in revenue?
This is revenue. This is units. So basically,
units.
They've been heavily discounted.
Probably, they've been heavily discounted.
Yeah, but that's what's driven it. But those games are still brilliant, right? That's the point. Like, they are still excellent games. They hold up well. Fallout 4 was number one in the month of April 2024 when the Amazon TV series launched. Yes, and it was discounted as well. But the point is, Fallout 4, even though it's 10 years old, is still brilliant. And it's like, we think back to our youth. We weren't playing games. The games that came out in 1990 were NES games. Games that came out in 2000 were PlayStation 2 titles. Those games weren't appearing in these charts.
I think that's one of the issues, right? I mean, the consumer's been conditioned to this, right? Not just for the amount of free games they get, subscription services, discounts, but also, I think one of the most transformative things, especially in the console space, and this is a very mundane observation, but obviously the PS4 and the Xbox One launching and having that backwards compatibility, which just wasn't really there in a meaningful way before. A digital library, right? And we all remember what it was like turning on those new consoles, PS5, Xbox Series X, and your games were just there. And it was an odd feeling, like, because before that, I actually find myself now, like younger people who I work with, like, actually, it seems like they don't really understand what I'm saying when I talk about generations. You know how PlayStation and Sony were big on, we believe in generations. And I don't think younger people really understand what that means because they've never really seen it anymore. Like, it used to be it's mad in business, right? Absolutely mad, insanity. And they're right to get away from it. And Nintendo's been talking about this challenge for a long time, resetting your user base and resetting your library. But actually for third-party publishers, it's quite good, right? I mean, I saw a lot of people, I had a lot of chatter around Switch 2, a couple of years ago when they're deciding whether they're going to make that backwards compatible or not. And a lot of what I heard was there was pushback from some of the Japanese publishers saying, please don't do this because PS5, it launches and you say, what are you going to play? Fortnite,
Well, let's be honest. If you bought
and you're seeing it now with Switch 2, right? You're saying about, no, they include the Switch 2 editions is included as Switch 1 software on their reporting, but they're not selling many games that you'd expect for the units that they've shipped.
Run through this. I was talking to Reggie about this when he came on the show. When I bought a Switch 2, well, I bought Mario Kart World, obviously, came with it, basically. But I was a Nintendo Switch Online customer, which I imagine a lot of people who bought the Switch 2 at the beginning were. That means you got upgrades to those two Zelda games, which you almost definitely already owned, right? So you've got a new version of Zelda games. You've got new updated versions of Scarlet and Violet that actually run reasonably well.
And then you went and played GameCube games on Switch Online.
And you've got all these GameCube games on there. I had a library of, I've got my old games have been updated and I play better than ever. I've got more retro games into my collection, and I got Mario Kart World. And then you've got CD Projekt and Konami, whatever, saying play Survival Kids, play Cyberpunk. And I'm like, I've got plenty. And it's whereas before, you're right, I get a new console and I'm buying 6, 7, 8 games particularly when I was younger, to play off the bat.
It's compounded by the fact that they can't get these games out as prolifically as they used to, right? Yeah. Some of these consoles in the past launched with a ridiculous number of original games. So that's also an issue, right? But I wonder with the Sega, coming back to Sega, I know it's only their last quarter. I think usually they've got a Sonic movie massively propping, up not just back catalogue sales, but they'll tie a new release to that as well, right? But I was thinking about this. Capcom, been boasting about their decade of kind of profit growth, right? And it's been propped up massively by their management of their catalog sales.
They're so good at
it. They're so good. Their games come out and they sell and they sell and they sell, right? I've got it in front of me, right? Resident Evil 7. So I believe that came out 2017, 2018, something like that. it sold 3.5 million units in its first year. And then it sold basically 1.5 million every year since. Like, it just doesn't stop. Monster Hunter World's even more impressive. It does between 4 and 3 million units every year since it came out in the 7 years. Same for Resident Evil 2. Same for Resident Evil 3. They just keep going and going and going and going. So I thought about this with Capcom don't really do the definitive editions, right? But also, Sega's games are these big time sinks, massive time sinks. What are Sega's big games, right? Metaphor and Football Manager and Total War, and those are the sorts of games which you probably would add expansions, you probably would do definitive editions, but they're also the sorts of friends that my friend, the Final Fantasy fan, looks at them and goes, yeah, I'll put that on the backlog. I'll get to that. Have I got 40 hours this month to sink into Metaphor? Maybe I'll come back to it. Whereas Capcom release more linear action games, type of games where you might pick it up, and I'll play that this week. I'll play Resident Evil 4
I think Sonic Racing was probably in that quarter. I don't know. I didn't actually see which quarter it was. But obviously, from my Sonic Racing is a really good game, but I do wonder if it wasn't different enough, because you talk about, my thing is like Monster, we go back, you said...
When did it come out, Sonic Racing? Because I guess this quarter would be to September, yeah.
Yeah, September. But yeah. I think that game, it's really good kart racer.
It's a very good game, by the way.
But I don't know, I only played it at Summer Game Fest, but my feeling on it is it didn't do anything other kart games haven't done. You might have done them better, but it's not like, it wasn't like Mario Kart World, whether you love it, I know there's a bit of pushback on it. They put stuff in that game we've not seen in a kart game before. And it's all about like, we've got to give that a go. And I think when people have these back catalogue of games, this backlog of games, including brilliant games that are from 5 years ago that were as good today as they were 5 years ago, I think justification becomes harder. I think what's interesting as well with Monster Hunter as well, it's all about Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter Rise beat Monster Hunter Wilds in the last quarter. And you say it's because it was discounted. Yes, but also it still stands up to Monster Hunter Wilds, right? Which is, whereas, perhaps in a different era, that wouldn't have been the case.
But again, Monster Hunter Rise is like Monster Hunter World Light. It's more accessible. But also there's another phenomenon that we've talked about before that is probably different to what it was even 10 years ago. So talking about Monster Hunter Wilds versus Monster Hunter Worlds, I think Worlds came out in 2018. Monster Hunter, the newest one, Wilds, had a bigger initial launch, but then slowed down faster. However, for the first couple of quarters, they've basically sold the same. So it's that Tears of the Kingdom thing where everyone bought it, rushed to buy it initially, and then that was it's just more people were buying it at launch than that happened in the past.
More people bought Breath of the Wild in the last quarter for Nintendo last financial quarter than they did Tears of the Kingdom. And don't get me wrong, Tears of the Kingdom's been hugely successful, but I think Breath of the Wild
it's another example. Nintendo is obviously its own ecosystem entirely, but they're well aware, right? And that their games cannibalize each other on the same system.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, but one of the things I'll say, and I want to conclude with this, is I don't know if this is really a problem. I know that it is a problem in the long term, but if you're Capcom and you're making tons of money from your back catalogue, that's all right, isn't it?
Well, it's not a problem. It's like we're only selling something that. But on the flip side, you're selling 83% of your sales are old games. Good. Well, that 17% will join them next year.
Yeah, eventually, and you can develop it. And then when the new games that are breaking through, because AAA developers tend to be a little bit more risk averse, they tend to be a little bit more franchise oriented. It actually creates opportunity for new developers to break through. If you look at some of the big games this year or the last 2 years, Arc Raiders, Clay Obscur, Expedition 33, Helldivers 2, Repo, Dispatch, Schedule 1 Peak, all new concepts, original ideas, relatively new teams. And meanwhile, the big established publishers have this back catalogue they can lean on. I think it was fascinating that Borderlands 4 was disappointing for Take-Two in their last financial quarter, yet Take-Two still beat their expectations, right? It's
all a big... We're in a weird washing machine of an industry right now, right? Where everyone's trying to figure out what things look like. And certainly, one thing the only trend that we are seeing is that consumers want new experiences, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Arc Raiders kind of shows that, you got to own your niche and do something a bit different. Well, Borderlands, is that the future? Another installment of
it's not exciting people in the same way. But here's the thing: big companies there is so much you can do for back catalogs. You mentioned a few of them. You can put your games in a subscription service for a bit. You can last year, I think EA updated Command and Conquer, like the really old ones a little bit, and then sold like 1 million of them. You can tie into a movie and TV adaptation if you've got the benefit of having one of those.
One of Capcom's biggest sellers in the last quarter. Sorry, the biggest seller was Devil May Cry 5. Off the back of the and that came out in what 2020, 2021, something like that. It came out on the last gen, didn't it? Because they did I'm sure they did a PS5 version. So it's an old game, but that's on the back of the Netflix series, popularity of the Netflix series. It's their biggest seller.
And look at everyone pointing to Switch 2 right now. And I'm not just talking about Nintendo Switch 2 editions of Nintendo games. I'm talking, Assassin's Creed and Fallout. And you're seeing a lot of that. Obviously, all of this means everything's a lot more competitive. We know that. It's tough to break through. The bar is certainly higher for a lot of developers to hit. But I don't know. I think it's nice that we've got these big, that when you release a game, there's a long story to that game. It's no.
I mean, didn't it used to be the case 20 years ago that the vast majority of your sales are in the first month?
Yeah, then you're done. Yeah. But that's we're going back even further.
But anyway, that's nice to move away from that, right? That's a good thing.
I'm very conscious of the time, and we've got 2 sections to get through.
Let's carry on talking about old games, Dringo.
This one's I'm going to do this one quite quickly because I know that you know these markets relatively well as Andy, but this is Nike Partners. They are the data company that if you want to get information about Asia and Middle East and those sort of markets, you go to Nike Partners. They've just sent over early look for readers of the game business, their latest video game forecasts for Asia and MENA markets. The report tracks China, India, East Asia. East Asia is Japan and Korea. Southeast Asia, which is Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. And MENA, which is Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. Nike Partners says that these markets, all of them together, will hit $88.97 billion this year, so just short of $89 billion, which is a slight it's a decent 2.7% rise over the same period last year. The number of players is going to hit 1.7 billion in that market. Look, PC and mobile are the big drivers, obviously, but there are new growth areas that Nike Partners are pointing out. Female gamers are growing in this market. There's positive momentum around consoles too. I'll come back to that. India, MENA, and Southeast Asia will all be the fastest growing regions in terms of revenue and gamers through to 2029. And India, MENA, and China will also see the biggest growth in the average revenue per users by 2029 as well. India in particular is the fastest growing market. It's expected to exceed $1.5 billion in player spending by 2028. It's also, this is the madness. The growth in players is remarkable. Nike Partners believes there will be 500 million gamers in India by the end of the year, which is huge anyway. In 2029, that will grow to 700 million. I mean, all of that sounds good, but let's be clear. The big markets in those territories are China, Japan, and Korea will continue to be. And by 2029, Nike believes that those 3 markets will be worth $89 billion, which represents about 89% of the total revenue across all the markets they track. Despite only accounting for 6.3% revenue in 2025 across Asia and MENA, that's this year, console is set to be the fastest growing segment through 2029 as Nintendo expands its presence with the Switch 2 launch and spending on free-to-play titles and multi-game subscription services increase. Look, these are big numbers. These numbers are so big that even though consoles are such a small section of the market, that small section is still worth a lot. You went to Gamescom Asia this year, didn't you, Andy? And saw a different... We always think of Asia, we go Japan and China, but you went... So where was Gamescom Asia?
Thailand this year, yeah. It's very... But it's interesting to... I mean, I've made a brief... Listen to those numbers and you know why I make an effort now to kind of explore the Southeast Asia games market. Because it's super exciting, right? And just from a selfish point of view, it does grind you down reporting about how everything's on fire in the West every day, right? It's nice to go somewhere where things are growing and doing really well. But one of the things that I have kind of learned just through briefly kind of like going to, because it was in Singapore last year, is how different they are from market to market, like how radically different they can be. Like, say, Thailand, their gaming is very social. It's very social. Those are the sorts of games that do well. And obviously PC gaming as well is like well on top. Console market is not mature outside of Japan, really. But no, like it's a fascinating.
Well, Thailand's had a bit of a
around.
tough year, according to Nico. Social economic issues in Thailand and in Indonesia means that there's not slow growth in those markets. But that's the thing. That's what you mean. Like, it's different. Thailand and Indonesia. This is Southeast Asia. So Indonesia and Thailand slowed down their growth, but Malaysia and Vietnam have seen real fast growth. And it's the same with Europe, actually. I know that people lump Europe together, but I used to do the European charts all the time, and like Dragon Ball would be like the second best-selling game in France. And in the UK, it doesn't even get the top 20. And there's an NBA game. It's Poland or something like that. NBA is huge. Okay, it's just
The one that we always talk about is Invisibles, right?
Oh yeah, Spain. Yeah. It's just, and you've got these different markets, different territories. So it's not a simple case of just saying, oh, it's all mobile and PC and they're all at the same games. It is more complicated than that. I'm not going to spend too long. I say that you confuse those numbers. Whenever I read out numbers on the podcast, people can't keep up. There is on the newsletter. They will be on there as well. And if you go on the website, thegamebusiness.com, you can just get all the data there. So you don't have to remember everything I just wrote down. I'm going to conclude with our final topic, which is actually a mini interview. It's so indulgent because basically I chatted to two of the creators of one of my favorite games, or some of my favorite games, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark and TimeSplitters, Steve Ellis and David Doak. Now, these two, we last saw them trying to reboot TimeSplitters at Embracer, a new version of Free Radical Design. But obviously, Embracer went through its issues. They closed that down. They went through their restructure. But now Steve and Dave are back with a new roguelike Scrabble game called Beyond Words. I keep calling it Words Beyond because I think there's a Doctor Who thing called Worlds Beyond. It's Beyond Words. It is mostly just the two of them making it. They do have a few contractors, but it's just the two of them. P-Cube is the publisher. Dave said to me, they like the idea of working with a smaller publisher where they're big enough, where they're seen as a bit of a big deal, whereas the smaller company, bigger company might not be. The game's out early next year. There's a demo out now on Steam. Anyway, I thought I'd chat to them about it. I know them quite well. I did a TimeSplitters 25th anniversary panel with them at EGX just a couple of weeks ago. So here it is, Steve Ellis and David Doak. Hello, David. Hello, Steve. Welcome to the show. It's nice to have you on. You were last working together on the reboot of TimeSplitters. That's before Embracer pulled the plug. How did we get from there to Beyond Words?
Steve?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, after all of the fun and games of Free Radical, the first thing we wanted to do was to just do nothing for a while. So that's what we did. We had a few months off, but we still felt like we wanted to do something. And having been through all of that, building a team and being forced to shut it down again, we wanted to do something smaller. And for me personally, when I'm running a company with loads of people, I don't get to do any programming. I like programming. It's kind of why I got into the industry. So yeah, we wanted to do something smaller and something where we could be hands-on. So we set about making a bunch of prototypes just to try and find something fun to do. I guess, yeah, this particular one came about just from a little weekend project, just to throw something together and see what it would be like to add roguelike gameplay into a Scrabble-like game.
You were trying to not say Scrabble.
And we did that over the weekend, and I think it was immediately obvious that there was an interesting game to be made. So we put the other stuff on hold, and this is what we've been doing since.
Was that so? Obviously, a lot of it was. So was it Scrabble Scrabble-like products? Other word games are available. Was that the inspiration then, or was there? People are comparing. The press release compares it to Balatro and stuff like that. Was there influence from that side of things at all?
Yeah, I always, for me, I'm only interested in games that I haven't seen the mechanics before. Oh, that's where I've got to. It's kind of, yeah. So I play a lot of indie stuff and watch indie stuff coming out. Balatro came out. I'd seen things a little bit like it before, but not really gone deep into it. And it was kind of like, oh, look, someone's done a really obvious thing. They've taken the roguelike mechanics and married it to something really familiar. So obviously the barrier to entry is much lower for someone coming to it. So in Blackthrow, obviously you know how to play poker. So with Beyond Words, you know how to play word tile games. So you've immediately got a kind of comfort zone that you're in. And then, you know, even for people who aren't people who would have even know what a roguelike is, you've got a base that you can kind of migrate from. And as Steve says, you know, we were just talking. Steve is a man of action, so rather than me getting a message saying, "Oh, why don't we try something?" I think on Monday morning it was, "What do you think? What do you think of this?" Like I go, "Well, yeah, obviously that's obviously going somewhere." You know, it's immediately interesting, even in a kind of game jam state.
You've had well-known publisher rug pulls, not just recently, but throughout your entire career. But by being able to do something like this, small yourself, where publishers perhaps more of a service company in this case, rather than somebody that's, you know, that you need in order to get the game done. Was that part of the thinking of this? What you said earlier suggests it is that, you know, the ability to just not have to just be, you know, you can get something out together.
It's the lightweight nature of it is important, and that also it feeds back into, I mean, yeah, a thing that I've always really enjoyed working in small teams is rapid development. You know, experimenting with something, rapidly making a decision about it. I watched a video the other day, which it was Rick Beato interviewing guy Ken Scott, who was a producer on a bunch of old kind of like 60s records and 70s. And he was saying, we used to have to make decisions all the time. You'd be in a recording studio, you had 4 tracks, you had to decide to keep the take or go ahead with it. And those were critical decisions you were constantly making. And I think it was really interesting because, yeah, that's what I like doing in games. You know, try something and then, you know, also you've got a small trusted audience of people. So it's me and Steve, and you could be honest with each other. No, that's crap. Don't do that. Oh, no, that's interesting. You know, that kind of thing. And, you know, and you're actively working on it, and then you don't have some gatekeeper later on going, oh, why have you done it like that?
Yeah.
You know.
You called it a first-person speller, David. I enjoyed that. I guess there is a certain expectation that you would always make you're the shooter folks, but I guess this makes perhaps a little bit more sense if you want to keep that hands-on approach, because obviously to compete in the shooter genre today, well, you know, even a game like Arc Raiders, they call themselves a small team of 120 people, right? It's a monstrous thing to do. But
I mean, there's a couple of things about the shooter thing. I mean, we're not as young as we used to be, and it's hard to make a game that isn't something that you would play yourselves. And you know, I'm not really any good at playing shooters anymore. I don't have the reactions for it, which makes it really hard to judge whether, you know, whether it's right or not. This is more the kind of game that I would play now.
Yeah, that seems.
I think that's quite a deep thing with it, is that it's been enjoyable to make because we enjoy playing it. And, you know, I've spent a long time playing it. I mean, I probably do more, Steve's doing more kind of like, you know, things which aren't constantly playing the game, whereas I'm constantly playing the game. And it's, yeah, I'm not bored with it yet, which I think is a really good start, you know. And yeah, and the nature of it, you know, the kind of roguelike thing, you've got a lot of fairly non-linear systemic interactions between stuff. So surprising things happen. I mean, surprising things genuinely happen. And then you react to them, and maybe that takes you down another road of design. Although at the moment, a lot of what we're doing is just balancing and looking for issues and stuff, and, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, it feels like making a toy in a way that when we did the TimeSplitters reboot, that didn't feel like making a toy, because a lot of it lost, you know, I mean, it was a lot of great experiences there, and a lot of nice people to work with. But you're kind of thinking, well, you know, are we actually going to innovate? and that's that's an exciting thing to do when you're making games and software.
It's really interesting. Going back to your music example earlier, David, and there's one of my favorite bands was being interviewed recently and asked, "Hey, are you going to make any albums like your first few albums?" And they were like, "We're in our 40s. I don't think I should be writing about meeting girls and at the prom, right?" It is like it doesn't. That's not relatable anymore. It's not what I write. It's not the space in the world I would write, and it wouldn't be authentic and it wouldn't be true. Thanks, Steve. Your answer there about I don't play shooters anymore. This is the sort of game that I play. That's interesting. I've not heard it phrased like that in the game space before, but I guess that's true, right? You would make something that you feel like you can relate to, you can understand, you can appreciate, rather than force yourself into making a genre that actually maybe, in the past for you as on a personal level.
Well, I mean, to give the kind of trite example of it, 30, well, not quite 30 years ago, but in the late 90s, we were both in the top 10 world console first-person shooter players because we were the only people playing, because we were making it. And then we let other people play it, and they rapidly handed us our ass on a plate.
Okay. Well, I won't take up too much of your time because I appreciate that it's you're heading towards deadline. Like Steve said, he's hoping to get it finished pretty soon. I now that you've sort of done this indie project between the two of you, are we going to be seeing a regular Steve and Dave Productions moving forward? Is that the goal?
Who knows? Let's see if we make some money from this one, Shea.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, the getting the band back together part of it to pursue the music thing even further has been really good fun. I mean, it's been really enjoyable to work on. The back end of it is less so, just because you get to a stage where you have to be much more conservative about things that you touch because you don't want to break it, et cetera, et cetera. It would be nice to get, I mean, it would be nice to have some success with it, because that would be, it's almost like a validation that you're still able to do something. I mean, I go to, we did the EGX thing recently. You go to these places, and it's great to meet people and have them telling you the things that you've made touch them. But then always in the back of your head, you're thinking, yeah, but that was like 20 years ago. Maybe I'm not any good at that anymore. So it's really nice to revisit it. As I say, I think I like the game. I think we've made something that's good. It would be brilliant if it, for us and for BQ, if it could go out there and have some success. If it does, I mean, I think we definitely have the appetite for doing more stuff. If it doesn't, we might then just be going, well, maybe this isn't something we should be doing. It's been nice to be doing something which feels like toy making again.
Good. Well, I hope it does very well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
You're obviously a rare fan. Andy, have you downloaded the demo to...
I've not downloaded the demo, so I want them to send me the game.
Yeah, I want the full game as well.
I don't want to play a demo. I think it's... but I am really looking forward to it. I'm becoming an older man as well. So roguelike Scrabble sounds like a 13-hour flight sorted to me. Balatro is just the mind killer. I was playing... I did play one demo recently. The PlaySec game coming up is called Racoin, I think. And it's like, like British arcade seaside coin machines.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that, but Balatro, it's like roguelike coin machine.
Wow, just literally put a roguelike on any familiar setting. Yeah, they know
where their niche is. They know what they're doing. They're just targeting me directly. So no, I am looking forward to it, but I think it's not that far off.
No, Steve actually said before I press record. That's what I said. Record is like you want to put the final build in before Christmas, so it's so
that's the impression that I got. That I there's no point playing a demo because I might have it in a few weeks.
Yeah,
but no, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm glad that they're making something that
it's nice, isn't it? Nice they're still together, isn't it?
Nice to get their hands dirty again and put something out that has a lower barrier of success, right? Rather than making this AAA monster that requires years of. I felt
No
like
one's losing their jobs if this doesn't work, right? And
few hit me. Few of those closures hit me, like Free Radical, the second time, right? For a lot of people, that was the dream, getting them back together. They already closed by this basically same scenario 20 years ago, where they had a game pulled off of them, the Star Wars Battlefront game, and had to close this really talented studio. And now the circumstances have finally come together that they can do that again. Years of work, and then they just close it. That must be utterly soul destroying for those two.
Well,
the excitement, the effort, the energy that's gone into building that game and that studio again, and then having to close it again. I'm just glad to see they're back making games, to be honest.
Yeah, and I like the fact they met for the first time. It was basically their first game, GoldenEye, in 1997.
Yeah, they're a bunch of students.
Yeah, I do think
they are kind of going back to that as well. Is that they make those games that we love from the N64 era were made by like 10 people.
Yeah.
And that's why you see that come through in a lot of their personality and their identity, because these guys were able to make, as they say in your interview, decisions about everything. Whereas as the games get bigger and bigger and bigger, they kind of get a little bit diluted from that identity.
Yeah. I do. One of the things that I liked what Steve said, and I never really thought of it in a game sense before, was this idea of like, he doesn't play shooters anymore, so why should he be making shooters? I thought that was you get it with musicians. I said it in the interview, but I kind of like the idea that actually maybe they should be making games that they can relate to. Like, and as older person as well, I don't play shooters anymore. But that's why I will say this, if they're listening, I want them to make a shooter. Make a shooter for me. Make a shooter for Andy. Like, we can't.
Well, I disagree with Steve. There is that it doesn't matter whether you play shooters. It matters that whether you're good at making them. I can't attest to sitting on NeoGAF reading video game news all weekend either. But I do that for a job.
Yes,
he's very good at making shooters, and I hope that he'll make one for me.
Yeah, but I guess what I mean is he sits there and he goes, I can't always tell what's a good shooter because I'm not in tune with that audience anymore. That's the point he's trying to make. And my thing is like, don't make a shooter for that audience, make a shooter for me.
No, that's what I mean. I think right now is that's the success, the few success stories we're seeing is making a game for a niche, right?
Yeah.
Why do you make a spy shooter like Hitman with objectives and like emergent little sandbox gameplay? That'd resonate, wouldn't it? You don't have to make. You don't make. The problem is really probably that he was trying to make that they were for the conditions. They're making Fortnite, right?
Yeah.
Don't make Fortnite. Make something for your audience, for your niche.
We had them on stage at the 25th anniversary of TimeSplitters, and this is a remarkable. So I never knew this about Free Radical Design. The first game they were supposed to make was the Second Sight game they released many years later. But when they found out the PS2 release date, they wanted to get a PS2 launch title. So they made the first TimeSplitters in record time to have a game for the PS2 launch.
I don't think the first one had a campaign, did it?
No, it didn't. But that's what I mean. Today,
I remember that being really radical at the time, like free radical, even some would say.
Well, it had a sort. They sort of just stuck a load of multiplayer levels together and said that was the campaign. But my thing with it today is like, I'd be happy with that if you gave me a few levels where I can just jump around and blast and have a little bit of a laugh in it. That isn't supposed to be. I'd be okay with it anyway. Sorry, I'm telling them what to make. They should make what they want, but I would love them to do that. Anyway, Andy, I am well out of time. We've run over time, but I knew we probably would have too many topics, and we always chat for ages. So, but thank you for joining us. Where can people find? Where can people read about it? I heard you're doing a Patreon drive at the moment. Is it finished?
Videogameschronicle.com. We're also on Patreon. Very, very difficult time for the games media. So if you enjoy what we do, please consider supporting us for lots of benefits. Turn the ads off and podcasts and videos and behind the scenes vlogs. But yeah, it's all on videogameschronicle.com.
And we're going to be in LA next week for the Game Awards.
Yes, indeed.
We've got the Game Business got a few TGA related special episodes happening next week, including a chat with Jeff Keighley, who? Yes, it's one of those things. I'm like, he's my business partner. He's co-owner. He's the owner of the Game Business. So it's an element of like, I'm interviewing the boss.
You reluctantly have to talk to him.
No, I want to, but I'm always aware that people go, you're going to ask this question, and we sort of talk about everything. We talk about announcements and all sorts. But 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 do join us for that one. I think it's a good chat. It's first time he's appeared on the show since we launched. So do Dan. But until then, there's a load of other stuff going up on the game business over the next couple of days as well. But until next time, thank you for tuning in.